when I was starting the preparation of this presentation, I thought that one of the most fascinating things about automation is looking at this photo. Because basically when the Ford cars started to be assembled on assembly lines, I mean, you cannot talk so much about automation because it was not an automated process, but it was a very streamlined process. And if you look at this, it is clear to everybody that producing cars one by one and have no plan for how to do it efficiently, it will probably be very expensive and very time-consuming. So having assembly lines was in the 1920s, the start of where we are maybe today. And that is why I say that automation in itself has no value. Because we talk about automation as, okay, we just have machines that can be automated, then we make a lot of money. That is not the case. It starts with a business plan, and we will talk about how to identify and how to figure out whether we can create some value using automation. I just want to tell you a little anecdote. In 1926, Queen Elizabeth from the UK was born, and I wrote an article about the historical perspective. And I don't know if you know this, but Heidelberg Druckmaschinen in 1926 was the first German of the German manufacturers that started using assembly lines for making printing machines. In 1926, they produced 100 of the Tegel presses a month, which is just, I mean, even compared to today, is an astonishing number because it was just like so huge. And that was the foundation of Heidelberg, of course. So this is just an example of things here. So I just went straight into the automation theme, but who am I and do I have any relevance to this discussion? I'm the editor of a small channel called INKISH. It started 8 years ago because I came from the printing industry myself, and I was a little bit sick and tired because I wanted to learn about how to operate a printing business. And when I went to the trade media, they basically had advertising and articles about all the things that the advertisers asked them to do. And when I went to the vendors' websites, it was about all the machines and all the capabilities they could do. And since I didn't have a formal degree in the printing industry, I thought that, okay, I need to do something. And I don't consider myself a good businessman at all, so I thought, why don't I just tell all the successful people's stories from around the world? And now we have made more than almost 2,000 films from Japan, from China, from India, South Africa, all over Europe, Middle East, North America. And we are so fortunate today that we are among the biggest in film in the printing industry. So about 250,000 people a year watches our content. And we are very humble, very proud of what we do. So when I talk about the topics that I talk about today, for example, it is based on a lot of experience seeing what your colleagues are doing in the industry. So I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel, I'm just trying to report, basically. So, but you should go to INKISH TV and see there's a lot of good films, and there's a lot of films also in German in case you don't feel so comfortable about the English ones. So I was just thinking that I think that all vendors are now trying to make machines that can be automated. But is it important always to automate? The very first film we did on INKISH 8 years ago was from a small hand bindery in Denmark called, I forgot the name right now, but it's a really interesting company. There are 5 people in that company. They do leather binding in copies of 5. They do the most fantastic, beautiful craftsmanship you can see on anything. And those people that have been, or that works in that company, are probably, they will probably not fit into a very automated world of finishing. But the value they create for the customers, based on the craftsmanship and that very, very special niche that they're working in, is basically a company that if they started to trying to automate their product production, they would probably fail. And if you make enough money and you can have the resources that you need in labor, in everything, maybe there is no need of automate. So that's why I have the asterisk saying that unless it makes sense. So everything that we are doing when it comes to automation is basically down to having an understanding of the challenges we have with our business and how we can move our business into something that has a higher value for the stakeholders, for the shareholders, for the customers, for the employees, for the society, for the surroundings, everything from the economy side to the sustainability side, to all those things that needs to be taken into consideration. And I believe that the reason why we have to think about this even more than we have done in the past is because the world is constantly changing. I think that all of us have realized that the time before the pandemic is considerably different from after the pandemic. We may think that it's not just about wearing a face mask. We also think that maybe our business, would we invest in an offset machine the next time, or would we consider digital as the next investment when we come to the printing side? We might even think that, okay, the commercial print should maybe be replaced with labels or packaging or something entirely differently. Or we might even consider how is the future going to look for our business in order, I don't know if you saw that, but yesterday Dr. Simel from Bundesverband Druck und Medien spoke about how the decrease in the industry here in Germany, the fewer employees, fewer printing companies, and everything because the world is changing. Is it changing to the worse, or is it changing to the better? I think that if we look through the history of humans, everything changes to the better for the overall of our communities, but maybe not for me, maybe not for my business, maybe not for my colleagues. So will you follow the trend that goes downwards, or do you want to challenge yourself and develop a business that is more valuable? I think that most of us here, we think that, okay, we will go in the right direction, but what is the right direction is, of course, a difficult thing. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of talking to some nice people at dinner and talking about the future and the trends of where the industry is going. And I would like to stress that the really interesting thing is not only where we as an industry moves, but maybe where the society moves. Because when we look at print, we are serving customers that have different communication needs, packaging needs, security needs, all those kind of needs. So it doesn't really matter about the technology itself. It matters how we can utilize the technology to create value for our customers, right? And this is, I think, a very nice example. This burger is, I have put it on to make a representation of the commodity. It's probably cheap. It's probably very fast to produce. I don't think there's been put a lot of passion into it. I just think it needs to be delivered in bulk, basically. And I think the burger to the other side is an example that if you really want to spend time on a product and make it look great and taste great, the value proposition for the customers are different. This, of course, also means that if you go to the exclusivity, maybe you have a smaller market, but you have a more valuable market. If you have this one, you should sell a lot of them to make money. Can you put this into a relation when it comes to the printing industry? Yeah, you can, in my opinion, because when we see decreasing print runs in commercial print, particularly in the larger volumes, the reason why digitalization is interesting to consider in the future of our industry is because often what happens, if we can follow the customer's need of just-in-time delivery, and we can eliminate the warehousing, if we can eliminate different portions of the value chain, you can actually sell lower volume print with a higher margin. And if you sell something with a higher margin, the volume itself is not really interesting. But what is really interesting, if we go in production and think that all we should do in the future is down to the product of one, then it's a question, how efficient can the technology that we are using make sure that we can print books, brochures, leaflets, everything, and be profitable in a copy of one? That is something that, just 10 years ago, that would have been a totally impossible discussion to have, because the printing machines were not good enough, the binding machines were not good enough, the computers were maybe not fast enough for it either. So there was a lot of things going into it. So when we talk about these things, I think it's important to consider why we want to develop the markets in either an exclusive direction where it's maybe lower volume, higher value, or into the commodity where it just needs to be really efficiently produced and in volume, is basically that we have 3 needs that we at least need to. There's probably way more needs, right? So we need to make money on what we do. And then we have a labor challenge. These days, it's difficult to get qualified labor for almost all positions in a printing company. And then I write excellence is basically that you can think of, when you look at trends, as Tim mentioned, some kind of disruption takes place when we go from the Walkman to the streaming service. But it's also a natural iteration of technology, how technology is utilized things. But I think that what is most important for most companies today is in excellence, where it comes to the fact that you should consider having business development. What is the next thing? Can you produce products and services that are considerably disrupting the market? And it's always impossible to say what disrupt the market. And I think that the only way you can disrupt the market is try. And sometimes you win, sometimes, because the very idea of disruption is that you can't plan it. Then it's not a disruptor, then it's just innovation. So that is something that is important to consider. When it comes to the automation potential, the good question is that how do you identify it? It's very easy to be here because you see equipment that basically in your face tell you, here is the potential. If you use the ice link, if you use all the fantastic binding equipment here and all the setup that is automated. But automation in a digital transformed world is considerably different because it is how we communicate with people. It is how we market our products and services. It is how we sell the products. It's everything we do can basically be put into, I wouldn't say a formula, but you could maybe be something that can be identified. And we have to figure out how that can be identified. And fortunately, I'm here to help you. Just joking. So I started saying that one of the most important things when we talk about automation is because there's a reason for it. So think of this for a second. Value is not the same for all of us. I gave an example with a hand bindery, but if you are like Saxo Print, which we filmed just a few weeks ago, or another online printer, or another huge printer that has been really specialized or really good at doing volumes in any way, the values may be different. But at least a couple of ways to define value could be like customer satisfaction and profits. There's also recurring customers, recurring orders. So if you start identifying what is valuable for you and your company, you end up having something that is relatively easy to identify because you would not do, you would have a higher revenue, you would have a higher profit, you would have customers that are satisfied, you would have employees that are satisfied. All those ones are the plus words, so to speak. When you have done that, you basically start having a line where you define all the processes, where you start saying that, okay, here we are unknown to the market. Here we are starting to market ourselves. Here we're getting prospects. Here we are pitching the prospects. All the processes from how we communicate with a customer the very first time from being unknown till we have a recurring order from a potential customer. If you think of that process, all of us have hundreds, maybe more than 100 of different steps, and some of them are different from companies. If you are an online company only, it is different from being a company that is very based on talking to customers one-on-one. Now, when we have defined the values, and we have now defined the processes, basically think of this. The thing that in the process is valuable, you give it an upward bar here, and the things that are not valuable in that relation, you put it as not valuable. And what is not valuable? Just think of this for a second. When you want to automate, you basically want to put it on a computer. You basically want the computer to take care of things. So if you call me on my phone and I don't want to answer it, and I say, this is Morten's automatic answering machine, just leave a message and please send a check, right? Maybe that is not so valuable because maybe having the right person at the first touch point with your company should be a human that understands your needs, point you in the right direction. Maybe. Some companies, in my opinion, unfortunately, have now automated receptions where there are no people. You just dial a number when you go to it. I think it's lame. I think that's the first touch point when you come to a company. Just my point of view, right? But here you may have something that is, could it be nice that when files get into your company that it's automatically ripped and pre-flighted? Oh yeah, makes a lot of sense. So the higher the bar is, the higher the value is, and that is ending up being maybe your investment plan for what you should automate and what you should not automate. So all the processes and the defined values, you add them up and down, and the taller, the more important it is in your investment perspective. So see, that could lead to an investment implementation plan. And the reason why I find this quite interesting to think of is that if you go to consultants within workflow automation, they will point to you that, okay, you should use InfoStrip, or you should use Switch, or you should use this software to automate a very, very tiny fraction of your company. Then you go to the marketing people and they say, oh, you should automate all your communication online with this system. But there's no guarantee that these two systems actually work together, right? So when you think of this for a second, as a company and as a management of a company, in my opinion, maybe not using this tool, but you must think your entire business from a non-existing customer to a recurring customer. And those processes can be evaluated, defined on the plus and minuses that you put in, whether it is an automated process or it's a human process. So the output of this and why it's important, I put these 4 pictures here because I think we need some brain power. Because these processes doesn't happen by themselves. You need to have people that in your organization work with this. At the same time, we're always considering about cost. Because the more cost, I always come with this where you basically think of that in 30 years ago, if you were a 60-person company, 45 people would be working in production and 15 people in administration and sales, just roughly. Today it's the opposite, right? We have automated pre-press. We have automated a lot of binding. We have automated a lot of printing already. So, and by bringing the overhead cost up is getting it more difficult to sell because your margins need to be different. Because today, most of us calculate our prices based on the full cost model. So it needs to change, and therefore you have to be very cautious about what you do. You need the people. You need the experience. That is why I have put on in the big library. And you need technology, maybe not rocket engines, but maybe something that is more specialized and maybe better for the industry that you operate in. So optimization, not automation, but optimization has value in itself. That's my point. So by understanding how we can basically make all the processes into some kind of an actionable plan that can be put into both actions in the business, but also with putting some euros on it so we know how expensive it is. In my opinion, it makes sense. And therefore, when we look at the technology that is presented here, of course, extremely important, but only needed when you have identified why and how it supports your business objectives. So I hope you like this. Thank you very much.